Good morning, ROCKPOINT Church. My name is Meade, and today I wanted to talk to you guys about having an active and healthy prayer life. That it is one of the ways that we communicate with God. We bring our prayers and petitions to Him, and He is a God who hears us regardless of whatever's going on in our life. So I wanted to open up our Bibles today. Would you go to Luke chapter 18, verses 1 through 8. So hang on with me through this story. Jesus is telling a story here. He says, Jesus told them a story showing that it was necessary for them to pray consistently and never quit. Pray consistently and never quit. So he goes on, he says, there once was a judge in some city who never gave God a thought and cared nothing for people. A widow in that city kept after him, saying, my rights are being violated. Protect me. He never gave her the time of day, but after this went on and on, he said to himself, I care nothing of what God thinks, even less what people think. But because this widow won't quit badgering me, I'd better do something to see that she gets justice. Otherwise, I'm going to end up beaten black and blue by her pounding. Then the master said, do you hear what the judge, as corrupt as he is saying? So what makes you think that God won't step in and work justice for his chosen people who continues to cry out for help? Won't he stick with them? I assure you, he will. He will not drag his feet, but how much of that kind of persistent faith will the Son of Man find on the earth when he returns? What a great example Jesus gives us of a lady who was bringing her petition to this judge constantly. And eventually the judge said, I'm going to listen. And you know, God hears us. When we bring our prayers, it's not just something we throw up and nothing happens. God actually listens to us. He really hears us. For example, when I was in my early 20s, I worked at a music shop, and there was a guy there. We worked off of commission, and there was a guy there that would constantly find ways to steal my sales. And it was so frustrating. I got to the point where this was the guy I went to work and I just really disliked. I could not stand being around this guy. I was frustrated just by his presence. And I think oftentimes there can be people in our lives like that, and that's a different story for another time. But he was a guy, I eventually came to the point where I said, you know what, I am going to put him on a note in my journal, and I'm going to pray for this guy every day. And so I continued to pray for him, and I continued to pray for him day in and day out, asking God that God would save this guy and bring him into his kingdom. And as I started to pray, I started to see my heart change towards this person. But also, eventually, a few years later, I was able to point back to these journal entries. He got saved in a church. In that church, he eventually was brought on staff. And now he is one of their teaching pastors. And this was a guy I prayed for years. All of that to say God hears us. And he hears our prayers. It's something that he even calls us to in the scripture at the very beginning. He says to pray consistently and to never quit. So be encouraged today to have a strong and healthy prayer life, to bring your prayers to God today and throughout your week, throughout this month.